Good afternoon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Center for Research Libraries special subject webinar on South Asian resources. We are very pleased to have everybody join us today live for our webinar. I can see people who are still clicking in as they go. We do have both voice over IP, or we do have access through the telephone lines if you're having trouble with your computer audio. We're going to paste the phone number here into the chat screen, which you should see on the right-hand side of your screen, or by clicking the chat window at the top of your the WebEx platform, where you can see some information being posted to the chat. Just a quick housekeeping note as we begin. Everybody who's joining us, whether it's through the computer audio and microphone or through the phone, you will be muted on entry. This cuts down on some of the background noise, office chatter, other things happening around you, and allows other participants to hear the presentation to its best capacity. To that effect, though, if you have questions or comments, reactions, need clarification, please post us a message in the chat screen on the WebEx platform. We will read those questions as we get to them, and if we can clarify any comments that we make or have a time at the end for some questions and comments, we will do that at that time. So at any time, please do feel free to submit us some information from the chat screen. So thank you very much again. Let me just introduce the panel of presenters here today. From the Center for Research Libraries is me, James Simon. I'm the Vice President for Collections and Services. And joining me here in Chicago is Judy Alspa, who's our Area Studies Program Manager. We have two guest presenters with us today, which include Wendy Singer, who's a professor of South Asia history, and the Roy T. Wortman Distinguished Professor of History at Kenyon College. Also joining us from Texas is Mary Rader, Global Studies Coordinator and South Asia Librarian at the University of Texas Libraries. The four of us together will be presenting for about 60 minutes, and here's the agenda of what we hope to cover, albeit somewhat quickly and breathlessly in the course of the next 60 minutes. I'll be providing you an overview of the South Asian collections at CRL. Judy will talk a little bit about the South Asian Materials Project and CRL's other collection building programs, which includes opportunities for you to suggest resources for CRL to acquire and or preserve. Our guest presenters will talk for a little bit from the external perspective about the use of CRL's collections and collections at other libraries relating to South Asia. And then we'll talk towards the end about some of the new opportunities for collection access through CRL. We will have some time for some questions and comments, as I mentioned earlier. The participants who've signed up today represent a wide variety of interests and perspectives, as well as roles at our various partner institutions. CRL is a partnership of over 200 libraries around North America, with global members in Hong Kong, in India, and in Germany as well. Those who have joined us today include subject specialists from South Asia, related subject areas such as religious studies and history, and a number of graduate students and professors. And we want to thank you especially for joining us today. We hope that this presentation provides you some information that you can share with your colleagues, with your students, or with your patrons if you're from a library. And by all means, we are available for any kind of follow-on questions that you might have. I'm going to start off here to talk a little bit about the South Asian collections at CRL. This is a very brief overview of some of the major collections and collecting areas that we have, and we can talk more specifics if you have interest in any particular area as we have time. So here's a very broad collection overview to start us off. CRL's collection for South Asian material is both deep and rich. It covers all regions of South Asia as well as all time periods relating to South Asian studies. Our strengths, though, lie primarily in the colonial and post-independence area as well as in modern history. You can see the number of titles represented in our catalog is over 175,000. Just to give you a sense of the perspective, that represents about 12% of CRL's entire catalog collection. So that's a fairly sizable portion of our materials devoted to South Asian studies. Within that collection, you can see a breakdown of the kinds of materials that are cataloged, including almost 150,000 monographs, over 1,000 newspapers, and 20,000 serials or serial titles that we have here in our collection, which is based in Chicago, but sent out across the world through interlibrary loan and digital delivery. In addition to those kinds of resources, we also have major archival and record collections, which we acquire primarily in microform and in digital format, and major microform sets, which we acquire on behalf of our members. Here's just a very quick breakdown of the region of coverage. I should probably say the region of publication for our materials. The bulk of the collection, which is fairly consistent with other libraries' collecting patterns, tends to be, of course, heavily dominated by publications from India. About 80% of the publications we have in our catalog are published in India, with about 10% from Pakistan, and smaller representative collections from Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the like. A small proportion of the materials represented here from other areas include publications from the UK, the United States, Europe, and Russia, as well as other publications from around the world. By language, about 40% of the collection is represented in English language materials, which might give you a sense of the wide breadth of materials that might be available to the broad constituency at your university. Not everybody speaks specialized languages when they're studying South Asia, and our collection is really designed for broad access to a lot of the materials. But you'll also see here a wide representation of all of the major languages of South Asia, all of the official languages, moving down, from the areas of broadest concentration: Hindi, Urdu, Bengali, Marathi, Tamil, Gujarati, and the like. So you can kind of get a sense here, and this is just the top 15. There's dozens more languages that we have smaller collections. By subject classification, within the material related to South Asia, here's just a taste of the kinds of strengths we have within our collection, which include the language and literature collections, being the largest proportion of the materials from South Asia. This, of course, is both literature, poems, literary criticism, and the study of the various languages themselves. There's also broad collections within the fields of social science and history, also in philosophy and religion, and in government resources as well. The smaller portions of the collection moving down are representative collections in the areas of science, technology, and engineering, agricultural studies, education, law, and a variety of other materials. So this is just sort of a broad overview to give you a taste of the kinds of materials you would find in our collections itself. Here's another way to look at the subject collections. I just did a subject analysis of the variety of subjects that are represented within our catalog and put them into a word cloud. Sometimes this is like staring at tea leaves. You can pick out maybe words that are interest to you. I've picked some of my own just to highlight some of the areas of strength that you might be able to see in our collection, which include, again, literature, government information, agriculture, economic development, education studies, statistical information, politics and political science, industry, trade, labor, and you can also see here, of course, some of the areas of interest that are represented in the catalog: India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc., and the number of states within India that are represented in our collection as well. So, just to bring this down to some more librarian-y type statistics, you can take a look at the spread of the collection by time period, and this is by the date of publication, not by the date of the subject coverage. So we took a look through our collections both for the monographs as well as the serials to kind of represent the strengths of when the materials were published and acquired by CRL. So the collection really does span back to at least 1700. Although the bulk of the collection, as shown here, from the late 1800s to the present, you can see the collection spanning from the late 19th to the early 20th centuries, growing as we go till about 1960, which is when the advent of the major acquisitions for South Asia publications took off within the United States, primarily through the work of the Public Law 480, or the PL 480 program, which was an opportunity for universities to use local currencies that were used to purchase agricultural and imports for the acquisition of educational materials and library materials in particular. CRL was one of the major recipients of the publications from India and from South Asia through the PL 480 program, and you can see that represented here in the 1960s through about the mid-1990s in our monograph collection. Whereas we do not currently focus heavily on monographic collections at CRL, we do continue to collect significantly in serial publications from South Asia. So you can kind of see the swell of the serial publications, and that is a bit of an estimate, but looking at the publication dates of the long runs of serials, both the beginning and end dates, and representing that across the collection itself. So very strong collections within the mid to late 20th century up to the present day in our collections. Just to highlight just one or two things within each of these collections, the monographs, as I suggested earlier, came to us primarily through the acquisition through the PL 480 program, but also as through deposits from our member libraries and through current purchase and acquisition, as well as preservation of materials themselves. The strengths of the book collection include, as we saw earlier, literature, so that would include novels, plays, poetry, etc. And especially represented in that collection are many collections in the vernacular languages, Hindi, Kannada, and other languages as well. Also included are subject strengths in history, politics, types of materials like reports from various congresses and government reports, ministry publications, and CRL's wide collection of census-related materials. So that includes census publications, statistical information, demographic and survey information being published in the monograph collections themselves. Within the serial collection, CRL maintains a wide variety of current subscriptions and historical collections related to primary source publications from South Asia. We don't focus extensively on the scholarly publications, although we do more in South Asia with scholarly communication than we do in most other regions of the world. But the kinds of materials you'll see in our collection include trade, development, political studies, and development organizations, publications, and here you can see represented some of the titles like The New Age, which was the central organ of India's Communist Party in our collection. The one in the middle, the Journal of Personality and Clinical Studies, highlights some of the work that we do in foreign science and medicine collections. In fact, this is one of the highest circulating titles by article request within CRL's collection itself. And our historical serial collection, as you can see here, one of the vernacular titles, the Nagari Prakarini Patrika on Hindi literature, is a representative of some of the kinds of materials we have in our collection. And the newspapers, being one of CRL's primary collections for circulation, and one of the things we're known best for, is really a broad area for CRL's collecting strengths and interests. We do have long and important runs of South Asian newspapers, and I've just put up on the site, on the page here, a few of the examples of some of the long-running titles that we have from India. You can see some of the major titles here in Pakistan as well, such as Tribune and Dawn. On the next slide, covering other countries within South Asia itself, we have long runs of these titles. I know I am running through these fast. These slides will be available on our site afterwards if you want to go back and refer to them, and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel for you to share with other people. Finally, just to wrap this up, some of the major research collections, which I referred to, come through major microform sets, publications of the National Archives, and the like. And here's just a few examples of the types of things that we have, including Church Missionary Society archives and records, lots of material from the India Office, Library and records of the East India Company, statistical information and the international census publications that I referred to, and then long tracts of information relating to the legislative councils, both the central legislative proceedings as well as a number of the state proceedings as well within our collections. And then the various record sets from the UK National Archives and the US National Archives. Hopefully this gives you a taste of the broadest part of our collection. Judy Alspa will cover how we build our collections through some of our special programs here at CRL.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I wanted to talk first about the South Asia Materials Project, which was founded in 1967 under the auspices of CRL to acquire, either through purchase, original microfilming, or more recently, digitization, unique research materials for scholars of South Asia. This community of South Asia Studies librarians has deep expertise in a range of languages and fields of study. By combining financial resources and librarian expertise, SAMP has leveraged shared buying power and aggregated the knowledge and contacts to collect and preserve essential sources for the study of South Asia. SAMP's materials are housed at CRL and are available for interlibrary loan. Jack Wells was the South Asia Studies librarian at the University of Wisconsin during the 1980s, and he wrote an article in 1988 about SAMP's history and accomplishments. You will note that SAMP was originally known as the South Asia Microform Project. In 2014, SAMP officially changed its name to include the word materials instead of microform, to signal its readiness to include digital collections. I will note that SAMP's sister projects, of which there are 5, have also made that change. I took this quote from Jack's 1988 article as it summarizes so nicely the benefits of cooperative acquisition, which is at the heart of what SAMP does, and also what CRL does. I've listed here a couple of recent additions to SAMP's collection. They include several titles from Afghanistan that have been preserved by SAMP. In addition to the titles listed here, the Middle East Materials Project, known as MEMP, has microfilmed and digitized several more Afghan titles. Another title shown here, The Antiseptic, was the earliest English language journal dedicated to medicine to be published in Madras. Also, a publication from the Bihar State's Public Relations Department with great graphics from the early 1960s. Although much of SAMP's collection is related to India, there's also an emphasis on other countries in the region. Recent projects have added to SAMP's collection of material on the history of present-day Sri Lanka and Pakistan. Shown here are several English language publications, but SAMP is very active in collecting materials in all languages of the subcontinent, including the Urdu title shown here. Many titles in SAMP's collection are available in electronic format, and they can be accessed through the CRL catalog, which is available at catalog.crl.edu. These bulletin items are linked to searches that will bring up a list of the titles in each of these categories. So you may be interested in exploring these lists once the slides are available. You may also find them using catalog.crl.edu. Select the Digital tab, then Advanced Search. The drop-down box labeled Location can be used to limit your search to SAMP monographs, SAMP newspapers, or SAMP serials. Place an asterisk in the Any Field search box to get all available results for your selected criteria. CRL's cooperative collection building programs are an avenue for all CRL members to contribute to the growing CRL collection of South Asia and other materials. CRL's Purchase Proposal Program is an opportunity for staff at CRL libraries to nominate titles that fit the general criteria listed here. The list of nominated titles is then balloted by CRL libraries. Titles with the most votes are purchased with CRL funds, and this material, once received and processed, becomes available for all CRL libraries to borrow. Those titles not ranked highly enough to be purchased outright on the purchase proposal ballot become eligible for the shared purchase program, through which member libraries may voluntarily contribute a portion of the needed funds for purchase of the titles. CRL also contributes a portion of the funds needed for shared purchase items. More information about these programs is available on the CRL website, www.crl.edu, under the heading Collections. Here you will see a list of some of the recent South Asia acquisitions through the Purchase Proposal Program. This program often acquires titles that may be too expensive for most individual libraries, but are essential to many researchers. This year's ballot will be distributed to collection development heads at CRL libraries in early November. I understand there will be at least one title related to South Asia on the ballot, so I would encourage you to be in touch with the person at your institution who will submit the ballot. The Shared Purchase Program also has acquired titles related to South Asia in recent years. Again, the shared purchase titles are purchased with partial funding from CRL, but this program relies on voluntary contributions from interested members. And now we're ready for our guest speaker, Dr. Wendy Singer from Kenyon College in Ohio. She's going to talk to us today about how they use South Asia researchers, how they use South Asia resources at their institution in the classroom and also for her research. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much, Judy, and thank you to James for putting this all together. I want to talk a little bit about the South Asia resources that we use at Kenyon, and particularly I'll start with what I use in my own scholarship because I am a very grateful user of CRL. Let me first give you a little background about me, and then I'll talk about the resources in general. I'm an historian of the 20th century in India, and have produced monographs on peasant movements in the 1930s, the history of Indian elections and women's politics, and more generally a textbook on the social history of India after 1947. As Judy mentioned, I teach at Kenyon College, where I've been for 27 years. I came here from the University of Virginia, where I did my graduate work, so I was used to having at my fingertips an excellent South Asia collection with resources both for research and teaching. In my first years at Kenyon, colleagues from Virginia would actually mail me materials to use in the classroom. And I continued for a long time to get by mail updates from the South Asian Studies librarian, Phil McEldowney, in the form of Xerox lists of acquisitions. So I saw my connection to the field as linked to the place where I'd done graduate work. When I wanted materials at Kenyon, we didn't have the budget to build a library collection, but we had some monies, and so I would buy books in India. I would travel there and buy books by the trunkful. And as a result, we collected 99 volumes of the collected works of Gandhi, all in khadi-bound editions, and other such materials. I chose to focus my collecting for Kenyon students on primary sources that undergraduates could use for research. So my own research had to be done by building a library in my house, buying new monographs, primary sources, and newspapers. This became clear to me was not going to be sustainable, and working at a liberal arts college, you don't have time to travel to R1 libraries as frequently as you'd like. Therefore, it was with great pleasure and to the relief of my family, which was being pushed out of the house by my practice of accumulation, that I greeted Kenyon's entrance into the Ohio Link library service. In 1996-7, Kenyon got a grant to add our library to the Ohio Link list. This really opened up research options for Kenyon faculty. Now we had access to an extraordinary collection of materials across Ohio and ultimately also at the Center for Research Libraries. So if you could change slides. This first item I remember ordering from CRL was the Times of India from the 1930s, which arrived in large leather-bound volumes, the size, obviously, of a newspaper page. I was looking for news coverage of the 1937 election for a book I was writing called A Constituency Suitable for Ladies. in that election, there were separate electorates for women, and I wanted to check on specific stories that were cited in other documents. It was so exciting for me to be able to sit at a table in Gambier and look through these newspapers, saving a great deal of time and energy, but also making me feel less isolated as a scholar, now being connected to South Asian studies in a broader context. So the implications were much greater than the specific material I requisitioned. What CRL provided was the fuel and depth of resources that let me maintain connections to South Asian studies, even as I learned to communicate my research at a broader liberal arts audience, which means comparatively and interdisciplinarily. In the 1980s, many of my contemporaries moved out of South Asian studies because the job market had been so difficult at that time, and they either moved into world history or other comparative studies because they didn't have access to these kinds of research materials. If you could change slides. I've thought about the changing nature of the field of South Asian studies both personally and in my own writing. In graduate school, I still benefited from the PL 480 program, and so when I put together a textbook on the history of India after 1947, I actually included a description of the importance of the PL 480 program, both for Indian publishing and for South Asian studies, and obviously its implications for development and the purchase of grain. I also wanted to note that this proliferation of books, monographs, and other materials from India is the subject of a lovely essay by Amitava Kumar that was published in the Kenyan Review in 2000. And in that essay, Amitava Kumar talks about walking into the University of Chicago library and seeing the shelves of materials from India that were purchased from the PL 480 collection. We now still benefit from those materials when we call them up from CRL. You can change slides, please. It was through the Library of Congress Acquisitions Project, in which they were collecting materials, that I got to know about some of the materials I later used at the Center for Research Libraries. In a conversation with a colleague and friend who used to be an acquisitions assistant at the Library of Congress in Delhi, Mr. Kailash Jha, I learned that the Bihar Legislative Assembly debates, and James mentioned that earlier, had been acquired and that a copy was sent to CRL. He actually visited CRL in 1985 to get a better sense of what scholars needed and wanted to be collected. So armed with the information that this material would be in CRL, I eventually needed them, and I looked them up in the CRL catalog and found a general reference, but that they had not yet been individually labeled. With the help of our Kenyan interlibrary loan librarian, Graham Corsi, I ordered the material, and our colleagues at CRL cataloged the whole set for me. There were over 80 separate pamphlets written in a mixture of Hindi and English. They arrived at the Kenyan Library just a few weeks later in 2 large cardboard boxes. The material formed the basis of a public presentation I delivered at a conference at NC State, and then were referenced in an article that I produced in an election law journal. Later, I needed the material again to check the citations before publication, and CRL sent them to me once again. You can change the slide. Indeed, legislative assembly debates have become central to my newest project, History of India's Policy of Reservations. Reservations set aside seats for underrepresented groups in India's educational system, government jobs, and legislatures. So I decided I wanted to look at how those functioned in legislatures, and it seemed to me that this was might have begun in Madras. So I wanted to look at the Madras Legislative Assembly debates, which also were at CRL. In fact, my hypothesis turned out to be correct, and I found early examples of a policy similar to reservations that was taking place in Madras. And so I then applied for a Fulbright Nehru Research Grant and spent 6 months in Chennai going through the municipal council debates to see how it worked at the municipal level. What that meant was, having already read the Madras Legislative Assembly debates, I knew what I needed to look for when I went to India. It made my research much more targeted. Having spent that time in the archive, I also found many more things in the Municipal Council archive and decided I wanted to focus on that material. But some of the references that I kept seeing were from the Hindu. And the Hindu, of course, is available in Madras. There's a large building where it continues to be published, and they have a very well-equipped archive. But when I tried to get into the Hindu archive in Madras, there were a number of hoops that I would have to jump through, including a number of permissions and restrictions on how the material could be used, also a restriction on how many copies I could make, how much I could duplicate. So I went back to CRL to see that the Hindu was available in microfilm at CRL. Therefore, I knew that I could focus my research differently in Chennai, and I could come back and use these microfilms when I returned. You can change the slide again. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the ways in which I use CRL with my students who do a number of research projects that they can, on their own, call up materials, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the big projects that I do every year in my History of India class is that I require them to look at the times of India from 1860 to 1880 and write a paper about anything they find in that period. It teaches them how to use microfilm, of course, but also it gets them to see this moment of colonialism about which I don't have other primary sources for them to read in that class. And it's an exciting project. I've gotten great papers, some of which later grow into senior theses. In recent years, and because of in recent years, we've joined directly to CRL, and so we have access to all of the CRL materials coming to Kenyon. And so in recent years, I've had them continue this process. We actually own, I should say, the Times of India microfilm. It was one of the things I required Kenyon to buy when I wanted students to do research. But in recent years, we've started using digital resources, both from CRL and from other vendors. And I have students go online and do their Times of India project. I think I started that 2 years ago. But by using the digital resources, they do a lot of searching and don't actually look at the entire page that you would see if you accessed it through microfilm. The consequence of that, I think, is that they don't get the patience, the slow process, or even the entire page from which to cull out some interesting piece of material. So starting this year, I've gone back to microfilm, and I've expanded their access. I've said that they can use other microfilms aside from the Times of India, anything from 1860 to 1880. I'm currently waiting for them to turn in their projects, but it gives me a new appreciation for the range of different kinds of materials and different kinds of access that we can have through CRL and other South Asia resources. I just had a student in here today talking about how he was approaching his project looking at ads for banks in the Times of India. So those are some ranges of things I do in my classroom. In addition, Kenyon has a senior thesis requirement, especially for history majors. And so I thought I would list some of the projects that students have engaged, many of whom have used materials from the Center for Research Libraries that were in fact referenced earlier today. We had a paper last year on the permanent settlement of Bengal in 1793. Another thesis on the history of All India Radio. A lot of her materials also came from CRL. We had a project on economic development in Karnataka Another student was working on the literature of Rabindranath Tagore and studied Bengali in the University of Wisconsin in the summer. He's been ordering materials from CRL, in fact, right now. We had a project on Muslim education in India, and another one on language debates in Madras, for which there were resources. This year we have a project on conversion to Christianity, and I'm sure the missionary archives will be useful there too. I'd be happy to answer any questions if people have them. This just gives you an overview of some of the ways in which I've used the library for my own research and the way we use it for our students. In addition to that, I want to express my gratitude that we now in this age have access to such a wide range of resources all across the country. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that, and that's wonderful examples, I think, of the kinds of materials that are used. In fact, many of those resources are used extensively. They're always going in and out of the building. But great examples and a voice of support, I think, for the kinds of work that we're doing. So I'm going to turn this back over then to Mary Rader to move us along to the next section of this. Mary Rader, as I said, is the Global Studies Coordinator and the South Asia Librarian for the University of Texas Libraries. And she's going to be speaking a little bit about, in response, I think, to some of the ways that we collect materials here and at other libraries. Mary, are you there?
I am.
Thank you.
Good. Hi, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be able to join in this webinar today, as it gives me an opportunity to talk about the interplay of two of my main professional concerns, South Asian studies and cooperation. Can you go to the next slide? The previous speakers have outlined for us the critical role that CRL has played in this interplay, documenting their 65-year history of collecting materials for the cooperative good, sharing them as and where we can, and preserving source material, including little known and oftentimes lesser used for scholars and researchers into the future. I particularly enjoyed Wendy's comments, and not only because she sang the often unsung praises of microfilm, and we could also say microfiche, as we saw in the slides. Through the collective efforts of CRL and its partner members in procuring, preserving, and or licensing materials, resources often difficult or impossible to access in the country of their origin were made available to her, thereby advancing not only her research agenda, but through her publications and her teaching, advancing our collective understanding of the region. My role today is to comment briefly on a few collective strategies that South Asian Studies librarians employ to gather and access materials from South Asia. Working together to enhance and diversify the corpus of material available to researchers, we can help nuance and refine our understandings of this historically, currently, and continuingly very important area of the world. Can I have the next slide? While many libraries and research centers around the country had small pockets of small South Asia-related material before the 1950s, next slide, or advance, the majority of the big South Asian collections in the United States were not created solely by entrepreneurial individual librarians or at isolated and well-resourced institutions. Rather, they came to their current expansive state under the PL 480 and subsequent Library of Congress Cooperative Acquisitions Program schemes. Next slide. As these next couple of slides show, we have all benefited greatly by these schemes, not only because of the tremendous amount of and variety of material acquired, but also because of the technical support associated with them, be that procurement, shipment, or cataloging records. Next slide. Because the material is so far-reaching and frankly just so voluminous, it has been a special help to have CRL pick up, retain, and serve subsets of this material, particularly those materials in subjects or formats not of immediate demand in the majority of South Asian Studies programs, for example, science journals from South Asia. Next slide. Likewise, the capture and preservation of established collections of research materials, as opposed to the currently and commercially available material secured through the LC programs, was not done in isolation either. As Judy has already discussed, SAMP, the forward-thinking and robust South Asia Microform and Now Materials program, has allowed libraries, librarians, and collectors of materials to collaborate in gathering, preserving, and providing access to research materials to users worldwide. while perhaps small in scale and deterministically grassroots in its orientation, as Wendy has already highlighted for us in regard to the newspapers and other primary source material. SAMP, like its siblings in the other AMP programs, has been an indispensable tool for saving research material to the benefit of us all. Next slide. If we look at the pre-PL480 holdings in CRL, such as this slide suggests, these holdings were largely created through the SAMP program, and the impact is even more clear. So what I'm trying to show here is where the previous slides for Wisconsin and Chicago showed that exponential growth after the advent of the PL480 program, but immediately before the PL480 program, we're all relying on CRL. With the help and support of CRL, a number of us have recently been trying to use the logistics of these programs to work together to diversify the range of material available to researchers, as well as to expose as much of it as possible to the wider world. I will talk about two such initiatives today, the South Asia Cooperative Collection Development Workshops, which build upon the LC programs, and the Emergent SAMP Open Archives Committee, which obviously builds upon the infrastructure created through SAMP. Next slide. Since 2010, South Asian Studies librarians have been hosting annual workshops to identify and explore opportunities for cooperation and to put the resultant ideas into action. Recognizing the ubiquity of LC as our common vendor and the clear pressures in all of our libraries to maintain efficiencies in selection, acquisition, and description workflows, we have harnessed our collective buying power and aligned it with the functional power of the LC acquisitions program. For example, seen on the next slide is a snapshot from 2013 of the change in collective profiling of monographs in Kannada, and then in the next slide, in Hindi. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Over the course of the past 6 years of workshops, we have made purposeful and at times provocative adjustments to our monographic approval plans and serial subscriptions maintained by LC, striving to reduce the redundancy across our collections and thereby increase the diversity in the collective national collection. Freeing our resources, and I would argue our intellectual constraints, we have subsequently been able to declare a wide range of niche collecting interests based on both institutional strength and librarians' knowledge. These next slides highlight some of the niche collection work we've been engaged in since 2010. This first slide shows my colleague Mara Thacker at the University of Illinois, who has been able to use her background and interest in visual and popular culture to acquire and make available comic books at the University of Illinois. And then the next slide, we are also collecting pulp fiction here at Texas. So in reviewing the parameters for collecting literature through the LC program, as well as the gaps between academic and public library collections, I was able to identify a gap in popular pulp fiction in the vernacular languages. Both Mara and my efforts highlight another strategy that many of us use to develop the collective collection, namely foreign acquisition buying trips, but that's a discussion for another time. Seen from the outside, the changes made through the ongoing Cooperative Collection Development Workshops initiative might not rank as transformative change, but we believe they reflect a small but meaningful shift in the North American collection, changes that rely on grassroots initiatives to inform and shape the diversity of both our individual institutional collections as well as the collective collection, thereby enhancing the range of resources available to scholars worldwide. The second project I would like to discuss today is the very new Open Archives Committee. Next slide, please. A subcommittee of SAMP. And I'm apologizing here for everybody watching the slides that I don't have jazzy images of boobs and guns for this initiative. This initiative is so new that we're still working through our foundational documents and adjustments to bylaws, and that's work that doesn't lend itself to sexy graphics. Next slide. In an effort to counter unsatisfying commercial enterprises, to respond to the recent reductions in grant funding, and to develop best practices which do not leave out our partners around the world, a subgroup of SAMP has recently begun a new initiative to crowdsource resources, be those financial, digital, or human, to create and disseminate open access resources related to South Asian studies. The initiative is based on the premise that subject specialists focused on South Asia are in the best position to set priorities for the near and middle term future of library resources on South Asia. to direct plans for the expansion of those resources, to create relationships with existing and emerging mass digitization projects, and to collaborate with repositories in the development of improved tools for the discovery of digital objects. A call for new members went out to the SAMP membership and others in the South Asian Studies library community over the summer, and we've already received good feedback and have seen good uptake on the project. Once the inaugural membership is officially constituted, we will work together to determine our initial projects. The list of early suggestions includes such projects as improved access to resources in the regional languages of South Asia, initiation of a selective digitization project focused on 19th century publications, collaboration with members of the Council of American Overseas Resource Centers in South Asia for digitization of newspapers held in the respective South Asian countries, the creation of statistical data through retrospective conversion of printed resources, and negotiation of open access to born digital resources. We're excited about this new initiative, and we find it a very forward-thinking venture, especially because its products will be available to anyone, anywhere. If any of you listening would like to learn more about this new cooperative, you can let me, James, or Judy know. I'll turn it back over to you, James.
Thanks, Mary. I hope that everybody can appreciate some of the complexities of the collecting activities that happen around the country, around North America, in fact, and working to help tailor our international collection to the needs of the scholars, especially some of you who are participating today, is hard work, and we put a lot of effort into it, so I hope it's bearing some fruit. I do want to just turn the attention briefly back to CRL and collection access, and as Mary was talking about ways to improve access to collections, I want to just touch on a few areas where CRL has grown in the recent years that maybe those who are thinking of our traditional collections may not be aware of. And so let me just focus in just for a couple minutes on some of the new areas where CRL has been working with our partner institutions to afford electronic access to South Asian collections. The first area, of course, is in the electronic licensing. That is, many of you may know that for the past several years, CRL has been engaged with its members in arranging for electronic resource offers, whether that's subscription or purchase to commercially available databases or data sets. And this, of course, extends to the international collections as well. This slide shows some of our priorities, and among them is the important point that CRL really wants its program to grow in the areas where our strengths already lie. So we're continuing to focus on the areas that I've talked about here: international collections, newspaper databases and news resources, statistical information and other data that may not be a priority for any single institution or consortia, but by working through CRL we can form ad hoc groups where combined we can maximize the leverage with the commercial producers to get affordable terms of access, improved language for the licensing and access for the scholars, and other benefits through CRL's work with electronic resource offers. The next slide just highlights some of the areas where we have worked with South Asian resources over the past couple of years. And that includes things that are directly related to archival sources, such as those offered by Adam Matthew, like the Foreign Office files or the collection of manuscripts offered up through the India Rajan Empire. News information, like the Times of India, TOI was in fact one of the first electronic resource offers that we put out relating to South Asia, and among the first related to news resources. Currently available now through CRL's electronic resource offers is a product, a small set of materials that Cengage Gale offers through their Archives Unbound. They have a set of area studies materials, including that on Indian history, that focuses in on the 20th century history, some small collections. And related to international resources are the broader sets of information like global news coverage. We have an offer available for the Financial Times current platform, ft.com, where students can can explore the coverage of India, Indian business and technology, as well as culture and events that are happening through the FT reporting, and that of the New York Times, nytimes.com. CRL works to focus its efforts on where it makes the most impact. So global coverage and news coverage are areas where we see greatest impact and benefit for our members. All of this material about CRL's electronic resources can be found on our e-Desiderata page. You can see it in the background, which is linked from CRL's main site itself. In addition to licensing, CRL has been engaged increasingly in the efforts to make digitally available resources from South Asia and from other international world areas. Since about 2006 or so, we've been scanning materials from our collections in response to scholars' interlibrary loan requests. That has produced over 5,000 titles, I think, that has been related to South Asia within our catalog, which are discoverable through CRL's online catalog. And of course, that is supplemented by the work that SAMP and other cooperative collections here at CRL have been working to make these collections available. The bulk, in terms of perhaps page count, it really do come from some strategic partnerships that CRL has brokered in recent years, including that with the Law Library Microform Consortium, as well as our newspaper effort through the World Newspaper Archive. And let me just touch on those just for 1 minute if you're not familiar with them. The World Newspaper Archive, or WNA, is a partnership of CRL libraries and REDX, a division of Newsbank, to make historical content from different world regions available to scholars through the efforts of CRL's collecting efforts and that of its member libraries. We've combined our collections to create modules of newspapers like the South Asian Newspapers Collection, which has about 550,000 pages of content relating to newspapers produced from 1864 to 1922, and covering such major titles as the Madras Mail, Kaiser-i-Hind, the Pioneer from Allahabad, and the Ceylon Observer from Sri Lanka. I mentioned the Law Library Microform Consortium, and this is an important area for us because it combines our interests in international and legal and government information. We've brokered a deal, a partnership with LLMC to enable access to the entirety of their legal collection, which numbers more than 55 million pages, which includes more than almost 8,000 titles within their database. Primarily focused on U.S. and Canadian law, there's a growing and sizable portion of international legal resources available in there. This should be, you should pay attention to this, I think, because it's not just for legal historians. Embedded within this content are vast troves of materials relating to government acts and information that have been produced. LLMC has digitized more than 250 titles relating to India and its states. Those titles include things like legal reports, like the All India Reporter or the Calcutta Law Journal, but also collections of acts from the central governments and states, and multiple treatises on law, custom, and native codes. So if you haven't had a chance to look through this database, which is available through CRL to your institution, I do encourage you to take a look and browse or search through that collection. Finally, I just wanted to mention something briefly, which is a discussion that is very much in development here at CRL, and focusing in on ways that we can improve or vastly expand the types of digitization opportunities, such as those that Mary was talking about with the SAMP Open Archives Committee, but more broadly speaking among the wide set of CRL member institutions and our partner institutions that are engaged in similar digitization projects and interests in international collections. This conversation came out of a 2012 summit co-sponsored by CRL at Duke University on the global dimensions of scholarship, through which the participants declared that the current acquisition practices and techniques may not be adequately serving scholars in the electronic era, where more content is being produced in electronic format, where scholars are increasingly relying on the digital or electronic form as their go-to means for access, in some point to the exclusion of print, and that where large-scale digitization projects are making an impact, they may not be making a comparable impact on non-Western or non-English sources of materials. So CRL has been engaging in a discussion among its members and with partner institutions in the United Kingdom and in Europe to focus on ways that we might leverage our shared collections and our shared financial responsibilities to provide a sustainable means for digitizing large bodies of materials from non-Western regions of the world, which might include large-scale strategic digitization of primary source materials, increased support for the negotiation and licensing of electronic resources, and exploring meaningful ways of harvesting key documentation for international research. This is something that, as I said, we're currently discussing, and we're looking to work through this more with our members in the coming months. So stay tuned for more information about that. I think that has brought us to the end of our presentation, and I hope that you found this information helpful to you, whether it's in your scholarship or in your reference duties or in your subject responsibilities. We do absolutely welcome your comments and your questions. I see that some of it come in through the chat. One of the questions we received, I believe from a librarian, suggested how do they find out more information about what we have? How do we identify the sub-collections that CRL may have in its collection? The easy answer, of course, is to go to our website to learn more information. We have extensive material on our website that describe the collections of CRL. If you go to our main site and into the Collections tab, you'll see that we have a listing of special topic guides relating to particular world areas. One of those areas is resources relating to South Asian studies. And we've recently been scraping the barnacles off of that and putting up some new resources and improving some of the reference resources that we have in there. And we will continue to develop that by putting up additional information about the collecting challenges of libraries around CRL member institutions and related resources at CRL, which include previous focus newsletters on the South Asian studies, resources that we have here at CRL, and some of the conferences that we've developed in response to this. We had just a question about, a clarification question about the Open Archives Committee, which Mary Rader talked about. There was a discussion about how the relations between SAMP and the Open Archives Committee might take place. Mary, I don't know if you want to field that question, if you want me to answer some questions. You're unmuted now, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, you can take it.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah, this is something that we're working on the financial plans for the Open Archives Committee, in that since it will be a subset of SAMP, that is, it is a committee of SAMP, we're looking to make it responsible to SAMP as its sort of parent body to help steer the committee. But specifically, we are looking for voluntary contributions towards the cause from participating institutions. So membership of SAMP is required for participation, but participation is not required for members of SAMP, if that makes some sense. We have, I think, time for just one more question here because we're coming up towards the end of the hour. There was a question about, it was a two-part question that just recently came in, some advice on collaborative microfilming as well as strategy for long-term preservation of material. Complicated question for both of those, but in particular, collaborative microfilming is an area that CRL has traditionally excelled in, and we continue to place emphasis on this. As Judy discussed with SAMP and our other sister programs, preservation is very much still on the minds of libraries that are seeking long-term access to the kinds of collections that we've been making available. And I think that those preservation concerns extend into the digital realm as well. CRL has long relied on its environmentally controlled and supported facility here to maintain the collections in print and in microfilm. And in part, that's the ultimate fallback, I think, for all of the collections that we engage in, is that we do hold on to our collections and we maintain those and make them accessible to the member libraries. Digital preservation, of course, is an area that is of strong concern. And we have multiple systems here, of course, where we maintain our materials, but we're also interested in seeking opportunities with our member institutions on framing meaningful ways to further support and engage in the preservation mechanisms for digital resources. I hope that answered your question somewhat, Richard, but I think I'm running out of time and I need to turn this over for a wrap-up.
Hi, this is Virginia Kerr at CRL. We'd like to thank all of our presenters today. These were excellent presentations. Please do feel free to contact them. We've got the contact information here. And thank you for logging in to the webinar today. We'd like to remind you about an upcoming event on discovering CRL's resources, examining various ways to enhance your discovery and what's in place right now and what some of the challenges are. That's coming up on November 11th, and registration is open now. We greatly value your feedback. It's very important to improve our programming, so please do take the time to fill out the survey, which will appear when you log out today. This presentation will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll send out a notice of that to all registrants when it's available very soon. And to stay connected with CRL, we hope that you are all subscribed to our electronic newsletter, Connect, which comes out every 2 to 3 weeks. And you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks very much.